The great hall of the Vesperian palace fell silent as Zixera walked toward the throne. Her heavy steps echoed against the crystal floors. Not a single cheer rose from the crowd. No one smiled. Many looked away. Today was her coronation day. She should have felt proud. Instead, she felt the weight of 1,000 judging eyes. Zixera was not like other Vesperians, where they had smooth, shining skin that caught the light like jewels. Hers was rough and bumpy, where they had perfect faces with high cheekbones and large, bright eyes. Her features were uneven. One eye sat lower than the other. Her jaw jutted out too far. Her body was thick and strong instead of tall and slim. By Vesperian standards, she was ugly. And now, this ugly princess would become their queen. "We gather to crown Princess Zixera as our new ruler," said Elder Crith, his voice flat. He held the royal crown high, but his eyes stayed fixed on the floor. "May she rule with wisdom, as her mother did before her." Zixera knelt, her heart beating fast. She had prepared for this moment her whole life. She had studied harder than anyone. She knew more about Vesperian history, law, and science than most of her teachers. But none of that seemed to matter. Elder Crith placed the crown on her head quickly, as if afraid to touch her for too long. "Rise, Queen Zixera of the Vesperian Empire," he said, stepping back faster than was proper. The crowd bowed, but their movements were stiff. No one shouted the traditional blessing. No one threw the customary flower petals. Just silence and small whispers behind hands. Zixera stood and faced her people. "I promise to serve the Vesperian Empire with all my heart," she said, her voice strong despite the pain she felt inside. "Our empire will grow stronger and more prosperous under my rule." A few nobles nodded, but most looked uncomfortable. 3 officials near the front row exchanged looks that clearly said, "This is a bad sign for our future." Later that night, alone in the royal chambers, Zixera removed her heavy formal robes and crown. Her private assistant, Lena, was the only one who didn't seem to mind her appearance. But even Lena kept a careful distance. "The royal advisors have left the day's reports on your desk, Your Majesty," Lena said. "They said they will await your written orders tomorrow." Zixera nodded. She understood what this meant. The advisors did not want face-to-face meetings with their ugly queen. They would communicate through papers and messengers. "Thank you, Lena. You may go." When the door closed, Zixera walked to the large mirror on the wall. The face that looked back at her was the same one she had seen all her life. The same face that had made her nurse scream when she was born. The same face that had caused her own father to avoid looking at her. "I am still a queen," she whispered to herself. "I will be a good queen." She turned to the stack of reports. If they wouldn't let her rule in person, she would rule through her words and decisions. She would prove her worth. For the next week, Queen Zixera barely left her chambers. She studied every report, wrote detailed instructions, and made smart decisions that surprised her advisors. But still, they avoided her. In meetings, they sent junior officials who couldn't hide their discomfort. At the first public ceremony, the crowd stood far back from the royal platform. A child pointed at her and was quickly hushed by its mother. "Do not look directly at the queen," the mother whispered. "They say her ugliness is a bad sign from the ancestors." Zixera heard this, as she heard most whispers about her. Her hearing was excellent. Another way she differed from normal Vesperians. That night, she stood on her private balcony, looking at the 3 moons of her world. The palace stretched out below her, beautiful and cold. Beyond were the lights of the capital city, full of people who feared their own queen. "I can rule without being seen," she told herself. "I can be a good queen from the shadows." But deep in her heart, Queen Zixera of the mighty Vesperian Empire felt more alone than any beggar on the streets below. 3 months into Queen Zixera's rule, a message arrived that changed everything. A new species had entered Vesperian space. They called themselves humans. "The human ship requests permission to dock at our orbital station," said Advisor Nex, careful to look at the wall behind Zixera rather than at her face. They say they come in peace and wish to establish relations. Zixera felt a rush of excitement. A new species. This was the first contact in over 100 years, and it had happened during her rule. Grant them permission, she said. Prepare a welcome party. I will. Your Majesty, Nex cut in quickly. The Royal Council suggests that High Minister Veth lead the welcome, given the delicate nature of first impressions. The meaning was clear. They didn't want the humans' first sight of Vesperians to be their ugly queen. Zixera's hands tightened on the arms of her throne. Very well. But I will meet them eventually. The council couldn't argue with that, but the looks they exchanged said they would delay it as long as possible. 5 days later, the human delegation arrived at the royal palace. Zixera watched from a hidden balcony as they entered the great hall. Humans were strange-looking creatures. They had no scales or shimmer to their skin. Their bodies were oddly shaped with round heads and small eyes. They wore colorful cloth over much of their bodies. The human leader stepped forward. I am Ambassador Diane Wells of the United Earth Alliance. We bring greetings from Earth to the Vesperian Empire. High Minister Veth bowed. We welcome you to Vesperia. I speak for Queen Zixera, who is indisposed at present. Zixera frowned at the lie. She wasn't sick. She was being hidden. The welcome feast went on for hours. Zixera returned to her chambers, feeling more alone than ever. A historic moment was happening, and she was pushed aside. That night, she couldn't sleep. She left her room and walked to her private garden, a place where she could be alone under the stars without worrying about shocking anyone with her appearance. As she rounded a corner, she almost ran into someone, a human. It was one of the visitors, a male with short brown hair and a face that grew hair around the mouth area. Oh, sorry about that, he said, stepping back. Then his eyes widened. Wait, are you? Zixera froze, ready for the usual look of disgust. But it didn't come. I'm Joe Martinez, engineer with the Earth delegation, he said, holding out his hand. And you must be Queen Zixera. I recognize the royal markings on your clothes. Zixera stared at his hand, then at his face. He was looking directly at her, not at the ground or the wall or anywhere else. Yes, I am Queen Zixera, she said slowly, reaching out to touch his hand as she had seen the other humans do with the ministers. What are you doing in the royal gardens? Joe smiled. Got lost, to be honest. This palace is huge. I was trying to find my way back to the guest wing when I noticed some interesting plant life. He pointed to a glowing blue flower. Is that really using bioluminescence? That's fascinating. Zixera couldn't believe it. This human was having a normal conversation with her. No flinching. No quick excuses to leave. Yes, it's a night bloom. The light attracts pollinating insects, she explained, feeling strangely calm. You're interested in our plants. I'm interested in everything on your world, Joe said. The technology, the architecture, the biology. It's all amazing. He looked directly at her. I'm very honored to meet you, Your Majesty. The ministers said you were busy with important matters. Did they? Zixera said dryly. How convenient for them. Joe's eyes narrowed. They're keeping you hidden, aren't they? No Vesperian had ever been so direct with her. Zixera was shocked, but also relieved. Someone finally saw the truth. Yes, she admitted, my appearance is not what is considered acceptable for a Vesperian queen. Joe looked confused. What do you mean? What's wrong with your appearance? For the first time in her life, Zixera didn't know how to explain why she was ugly. Because this human, looking at her with interested eyes, didn't seem to see it at all. So you use crystal power cores? Joe asked, his eyes bright with interest. We've only managed to create small versions in our labs. Zixera nodded, enjoying the conversation. This was their third meeting in the garden. After their first chance encounter, they had agreed to meet again. Our empire has used crystal technology for 500 years, she explained. I could show you the main power center sometime. I'd love that, Joe said. The other engineers on my team would be so jealous. It had been 2 weeks since the humans arrived. The official meetings between the two species moved slowly. But here, in the quiet garden at night, a different kind of diplomacy was happening. Zixera found herself looking forward to these talks. Joe treated her normally. He looked at her when she spoke. He laughed at her jokes. He asked for her opinions. "Why aren't you at the diplomatic meetings?" Joe asked one night. "Seems strange that the Queen isn't involved." Zixera sighed. "My advisors prefer to keep me away from public view." Joe frowned. "Because of what you mentioned before, about your appearance." He shook his head. "I still don't understand. By Vesperian standards, I am extremely ugly," Zixera said plainly. "My skin doesn't shine. My face is asymmetrical. My body is too thick." Joe looked confused. "That's it. That's why they hide you away. Our culture values beauty above almost everything else," she explained. "A queen should be the most beautiful example of our species." "That's ridiculous," Joe said. "Where I come from, leaders are chosen for their minds, not their looks." Zixera smiled slightly. "That sounds like a better system." The next night, Joe brought his datapad. "I wanted to show you some human engineering designs. Maybe you could tell me if any of this would be useful for trade." As they looked through the designs, Zixera pointed out improvements. Joe typed notes quickly. "These ideas are brilliant," he said. "You understand engineering better than most of my colleagues." "I studied many subjects while growing up," Zixera said. "I wasn't allowed to attend public events or ceremonies, so I had much time for learning." "Their loss, our gain," Joe said with a smile. "Hey, I had an idea. What if we set up official technical meetings between our teams? You could lead the Vesperian side." Zixera hesitated. "My advisors wouldn't like it." "Tell them it's a human requirement," Joe suggested. "Say we insist on meeting with the highest authority on technology." The next day, Zixera did exactly that. Her council was upset, but couldn't refuse without risking the important human trade deal. When Zixera entered the meeting room, the Vesperian officials looked at the floor, but Joe and his team stood and bowed respectfully. "Queen Zixera, thank you for joining us," Ambassador Wells said. "Engineer Martinez speaks highly of your technical knowledge." For the next 2 hours, Zixera led the discussion about technology exchange. She drew diagrams, answered questions, and proposed solutions to problems. The human team was clearly impressed. Even some of the Vesperian officials looked surprised at her knowledge. After the meeting, Minister Veth approached her. "Your Majesty, I did not realize you had such expertise in these matters." "There are many things about me you do not know, Minister," Zixera replied. That night in the garden, Joe was waiting with a big smile. "You were amazing today. Did you see their faces when you explained the crystal matrix alignment?" Zixera felt warm inside. It felt good to be heard. "You should be heard more often," Joe said seriously. "You're brilliant. In my world, brilliance doesn't matter if you look like me." Joe moved closer. "In my world, what's inside a person matters most." He hesitated, then added, "And I think what's inside you is beautiful." Zixera felt something strange in her chest, a fluttering, nervous feeling she had never experienced before. No one had ever called any part of her beautiful. "Thank you," she whispered. Under the 3 moons of the Vesperian night, something new began to grow between a human engineer and an alien queen, something neither of their worlds had prepared them for. "This is unacceptable." Royal Advisor Angsathul slammed his fist on the table. "The Queen cannot keep appearing at these meetings. The humans will think all Vesperians look like that." The council room buzzed with angry voices. For the past month, Queen Zixera had been leading the technology meetings with the humans. She had even started attending some diplomatic dinners. The council members were not happy. "She embarrasses our entire species," said Minister Veth. "Yesterday I overheard a human ask if she was ill." What the minister didn't say was that the human had only asked this because Veth himself had treated the queen so poorly, refusing to stand near her. Inxthul lowered his voice. "There is a solution. Our laws allow for removal of a ruler who is unfit." The other council members looked nervous but interested. Meanwhile, in the Royal Science Lab, Zixera was showing Joe a new crystal power design. "This could improve efficiency by 40%, she explained, her fingers tracing the blueprint. "I've been working on this idea for years." Joe studied the design with wide eyes. "This is revolutionary. Why haven't your scientists implemented it?" Zixera gave a bitter smile. "They refused to look at anything created by me. They said the design was probably flawed, like my appearance." Joe shook his head in frustration. "That's insane. You're the smartest person I've met in any species." Zixera felt that warm flutter in her chest again. It happened every time Joe complimented her or stood close to her. "The council is growing unhappy with my public appearances," she said quietly. "Let them be unhappy," Joe replied. "You're their queen. And the human delegation specifically requests your presence at all technical meetings." Later that day, Ambassador Wells called a meeting with the human team. "We need to speed up these negotiations," she told them. "Earth Command wants a signed treaty within 2 weeks." "That's not enough time," Joe protested. "We're just starting to build trust with Queen Zixera." "Speaking of the Queen," said Security Chief Hoffman, "why do the Vesperians treat her so strangely? They act like she's contagious. Their culture is obsessed with physical appearance." Kate Roberts, the cultural specialist, explained. "By their standards, she's considered extremely ugly. It's a miracle she became queen at all." "That's ridiculous," Joe said sharply. "She's brilliant and a good leader." Ambassador Wells raised an eyebrow at Joe's tone. "You've been spending a lot of time with her, Martinez. Remember, your primary mission is to secure this treaty, not make friends." "Understanding their queen helps the mission," Joe insisted. After the meeting, Joe walked through the palace gardens, thinking. His feelings for Zixera had grown stronger each day. He admired her mind, her courage, and her kindness. When he looked at her, he didn't see an ugly alien as others did. He saw a remarkable person who made his heart beat faster. As he rounded a corner, he overheard voices. "The plan is set," said a voice he recognized as Inxthul's. "In 3 days, we declare her unfit to rule. The law allows for a health examination. When the doctors confirm her physical abnormalities, we can remove her from the throne." "What about the humans?" asked another voice. "They'll be gone by then. Their ambassador is pushing for a quick treaty signing." Joe stepped back quietly, his hands shaking with anger. He had to warn Zixera. He found her in the science lab, working alone. "Your advisors are planning to overthrow you," he said without greeting. "They're going to use your appearance to declare you unfit to rule." Zixera's face showed pain but not surprise. "I felt this coming for weeks." "We have to stop them," Joe said. She looked at him curiously. This is not your fight, Joe." "It is my fight," he said firmly. "I won't let them hurt you." "Why do you care so much?" she asked softly. Joe took a deep breath. The answer was suddenly clear to him, though it might change everything. "Because I love you," he said simply. "And where I come from, we fight for those we love." Zixera stared at Joe, stunned by his words. Love? No one had ever loved her before. "You cannot love me," she whispered. "Look at me." "I am looking at you," Joe said, stepping closer. "I see your courage, your brilliant mind, your kind heart. That's what matters to humans." Before she could respond, the door burst open. Ambassador Wells and Security Chief Hoffman rushed in. "Martinez, we need to leave immediately," said Hoffman. "We've received word that the Council is planning something that could threaten our mission." Joe looked at Zixera, torn between duty and his heart. "Go," Zixera said quietly. "This is my fight." "I'll come back for you," Joe promised. "Trust me." The next morning, guards surrounded Zixera's chambers. "Queen Zixera," announced Anxathul through the door. "The Royal Council has called for a health examination according to Section 12 of our laws. Please come with us." Zixera knew what this meant. They would use her physical differences to remove her from power, but she would not hide anymore. She opened the door and faced them. "I am your queen. I will not be examined like a sick animal." Anxathul smiled coldly. "Then you leave us no choice. Until you submit to examination, you are confined to your chambers under guard." They locked her inside, posting 4 guards at her door. That night, as Zixera paced her room thinking of escape plans, she heard a soft tap at her balcony window. She pulled back the curtain to find Joe hanging from a rope. "I told you I'd come back," he whispered as she let him in. "The human delegation is leaving tomorrow, but I'm staying." "How did you get up here?" she asked, amazed. Joe grinned. "I'm an engineer, remember? Now let's get you out of here." Using a device he'd made from human and Vesperian technology, Joe disabled the lock on her door. They slipped past the sleeping guards and made their way to the royal hangar. "Where are we going?" Zixera asked as they boarded a small shuttle. "Your assistant Lina told me about the Sacred Mountains," Joe explained. "She said there's ancient Vesperian technology there that only responds to royal blood. We need leverage against the Council." As their shuttle raced toward the mountains, the palace alarm sounded behind them. Their escape had been discovered. "They'll send ships after us," Zixera said. "Then we better hurry," Joe replied, pushing the engines harder. They landed at the base of the tallest mountain just as dawn broke. A hidden entrance was carved into the rock, marked with the royal symbol. "Only those of royal blood may enter," Zixera read from the inscription. She placed her hand on the door. The stone glowed and slowly opened. Inside, they found a chamber filled with technology far more advanced than anything in the current Vesperian Empire. Glowing consoles and strange devices lined the walls. "What is all this?" Joe asked in wonder. "Our ancestors' greatest achievements," Zixera said, touching a console that lit up at her touch. "Stories say they hid their most powerful technology here when they feared it might be misused." A holographic image appeared, showing a Vesperian who looked remarkably like Zixera, with the same features that her society now called ugly. "This was Queen Vexora, the founder of our empire," Zixera said in shock. "She looks like me." Joe smiled. "Maybe what your people call ugly was once considered normal or even special." As they explored further, they heard ships approaching. "They found us," Zixera said. "Then it's time to use whatever advantage this place gives us," Joe replied. "You are the rightful queen. Your ancestors built this place for a reason." Zixera took a deep breath and placed her hands on the central console. The entire chamber lit up with brilliant light. "It's responding to you," Joe said. "Yes," Zixera said, her eyes wide with understanding as ancient knowledge flowed into her mind. "And now I know why I was born looking this way. I wasn't a mistake after all." Outside, Anxathul's voice boomed through a speaker. "Surrender now, or we will open fire." Zixera looked at Joe, no longer afraid. "I won't surrender. For the first time in my life, I know exactly who I am." "Open fire," Anxathul commanded. The ships outside sent energy blasts against the mountain, but a shimmering shield appeared, protecting the ancient chamber. Inside, Zixera's hands moved across the controls as if she had used them all her life. The knowledge of her ancestors flowed through her mind. "The shield will hold," she told Joe. "But we need to do more than just hide." Joe nodded. "What did you learn from the system?" "Everything," Zixera said with wonder in her voice. The first Vesperians looked like me. Over time, our people change, becoming what we now think of as beautiful. But the royal family kept the original genes because they were linked to the ability to use the ancient technology. So your appearance isn't a flaw. It's a connection to your past, Joe said. Yes, my mother and past queens hid their true features with special treatments and surgeries, but my mother died before she could tell me the truth. Zixera activated a large crystal in the center of the room. This is a communication array. It can broadcast to the entire planet. Perfect, Joe said. The people need to hear the truth from their queen. Outside, Anxthul was getting frustrated. Why won't the weapons break through? Sir, said one of his officers, there's an energy buildup inside. They're activating something powerful. Inside the mountain, Zixera prepared her message. I'm nervous, she admitted to Joe. I've spent my whole life being hidden away, and now I'll speak to everyone. Joe took her hand. Just tell them the truth. And remember, someone who loves you for exactly who you are is standing right beside you. Zixera squeezed his hand, then pressed the broadcast crystal. Throughout the Vesperian Empire, in homes, public spaces, and even in the royal palace, all screens and communication devices suddenly activated. The face of Queen Zixera appeared before the entire population. People of Vesperia, she began, her voice strong and clear. I am your queen, speaking to you directly for the first time. The Royal Council has tried to overthrow me, claiming my appearance makes me unfit to rule. But here in our sacred mountains, I have discovered the truth. Images appeared beside her, showing the first queen of Vesperia, who looked remarkably like Zixera. This is Queen Vexora, founder of our empire. The royal bloodline preserved her appearance because it connects us to our ancestors' technology. What the council calls ugly is actually our original form, a form of power and history. Across the planet, Vesperians stared in shock at their screens. Many had never seen their queen clearly before. Some gasped at her appearance, but others were captivated by her words and the images of their ancient queen. For too long, our society has valued physical beauty above all else. Zixera continued. We have forgotten what truly matters: wisdom, courage, and kindness. I stand before you now, hiding nothing, asking for your support against those who would overthrow your rightful queen based on shallow judgments. She gestured to Joe, who stepped into view. This human has shown me that beauty is not universal. Different cultures value different things. On Earth, appearance matters less than character and actions. Perhaps we have something to learn from our new friends. In homes across the empire, ordinary Vesperians looked at each other. Many had felt the pressure of impossible beauty standards. Many had been judged for small imperfections. The queen's words touched something deep inside them. At the royal palace, Minister Veth watched the broadcast with growing concern. Citizens were gathering in the streets. Some were chanting the queen's name. Back at the mountain, Anxthul ordered another attack. Cut the broadcast. Destroy the entrance. But his officers were hesitating, watching the queen's message on their own screens. Sir, said one young officer, what if she's telling the truth? What if our history is not what we thought? As Anxthul raged, more ships appeared on the horizon. But they weren't reinforcements. The Royal Guard had arrived, led by Commander Krill. This is Commander Krill, came a transmission. By order of the people of Vesperia, Advisor Anxthul is to stand down immediately. Queen Zixera has the support of the Royal Guard and the citizens. The revolution had begun, not with weapons, but with truth, and it was spreading across the planet faster than anyone could have imagined. 1 month later, Queen Zixera stood on the balcony of the royal palace. Below her, thousands of Vesperians gathered in the main square. This time, they didn't look away. This time, they cheered. Long live Queen Zixera! They shouted, their voices rising to the 3 moons above. Beside her stood Joe, now wearing formal Vesperian clothes with Earth symbols added. Their hands were joined, fingers intertwined. "I still can't believe how much has changed," Zix Era said softly. And indeed, everything had changed. After her broadcast from the sacred mountains, the people had risen in support of their queen. Angstthul and his closest allies had been arrested for treason. The royal guard had escorted Zix Era back to the palace in triumph. Most surprisingly, thousands of ordinary Vesperians had come forward, those with small differences in their appearance, those who didn't meet the strict beauty standards. They had lived in the shadows, just like their queen. "Your Majesty," said Commander Krill, approaching with a bow. "The new council members have arrived for the ceremony." Zix Era nodded. "Thank you, Commander. We will join them shortly." The new royal council waited in the Great Hall. Unlike the old council, these members had been chosen for their wisdom and skills, not their appearance. Some looked like traditional Vesperians, but others had variations that would have kept them from power in the old system. Ambassador Wells was there too, with a new treaty ready to sign. The human delegation had returned when they heard about the revolution. "You've changed an entire culture in 1 month," Joe said with admiration. "That's incredible." "Not changed," Zix Era corrected, reminded them of what we once were. The ancient records showed that early Vesperian society valued knowledge and character above physical appearance. Somewhere along the way, we lost that wisdom. She touched the ancient crystal pendant she now wore, a royal artifact from the sacred mountains that marked her connection to the first queens. They entered the Great Hall together. The ceremony was brief but meaningful. The signing of both the new human Vesperian treaty and the equality decree that would reshape Vesperian society. After the signing, Zix Era addressed the council and guests. "Today marks the beginning of a new era for our empire," she said. "We will no longer judge worth by appearance. We will value wisdom, kindness, and courage. And we will share these values with our new human friends." She looked at Joe, her eyes filled with warmth. "Our two species are different in many ways, but we have much to learn from each other." Ambassador Wells stepped forward. "The United Earth Alliance is proud to form this historic partnership, and we have one more announcement." She smiled at Joe. "Engineer Martinez has requested to remain on Vesperia as our permanent ambassador." Whispers spread through the room. Everyone had noticed the closeness between the queen and the human. Later that evening, Zix Era and Joe walked in the royal garden where they had first met. "Ambassador Martinez," Zix Era said with a smile. "A prestigious position." Joe laughed. "I had to find some way to stay. Earth requested a volunteer, and my hand shot up so fast I nearly injured myself." Under the glow of the 3 moons, they stopped beside the blue flowers. "My people still have much to learn," Zix Era said. "Centuries of prejudice don't disappear overnight." "But they've made a start," Joe said, "and they have an amazing queen to lead them." "A queen who was almost overthrown because of how she looked," Zix Era reminded him. Joe took both her hands in his. "A queen who found her power because one person saw her true beauty." "You taught me that beauty is found in different places in different worlds," she said softly. "And sometimes," Joe said, leaning closer, "it's found in the most unexpected places of all." As they kissed beneath the stars, 2 worlds apart yet perfectly together, a new story began, one that would be told throughout the galaxy for generations to come. Not just of an ugly alien queen and the human who loved her, but of how love itself could bridge the vast distances between stars and change the destiny of entire civilizations.